Hi, welcome to the channel. My name's Adrian, and today I'm going to take my review of Streets of Peril, which is the genesis of probably one of the games of the year, which is Oathhammer. So a few weeks ago, Dewan and I on our Critical Misspell channel did a review and giveaway of Oathhammer, and it scored incredibly highly. We were both utterly blown away with the dice mechanics, the world building, the random tables, the oaths and everything else. We're kind of discussing it, and it was like, this feels a little bit like baby Warhammer. And everyone's like, whoa there, Adrian, Dewan, have you not heard of Streets of Peril? And we're like, nope. Streets of Peril is the genesis of Oathhammer. It's the foundation. It's the dice mechanic that built that game. And I was like, okay, well, let's check this out. If this is more Warhammer than Oathhammer, which it is by a long way. But yeah, I was really surprised actually with this. I say this originally came out in 2021 by Broken Blade Publishing. I say I hadn't heard of it. Kyle has kindly sent me the PDF copy. If you want to send me a physical copy, that would be amazing. But yeah, I was really surprised. How I never heard of this. No one's ever told, as someone that's a huge Warhammer fan, why no one's ever told me about Streets of Peril, or more importantly, Oathhammer. But let me just sort of stop wasting time here. Let me just jump into the Drive-Thru RPG page where you can pick up only the PDF currently. If you want a physical copy of this, you need to go to the Broken Blade Publishing website, and you can get physical copies of that. As well as this Streets of Peril here, just in the right-hand side, Storms over Stormberg, which is an adventure, which is just going to flesh out the world. Because one of the sort of feelings I have about this, when I got into the book, was like, there's lots of world building, but I kind of want a little bit more. There is an adventure, by the way, and it's a really cool homage to Frankenstein's monster. So this is going to give you the idea of the world that it's building. But this book, it's actually a book, isn't it? It comes in at 176 pages. So it is written by Kyle Griswold. And I say this, it's a D6 pool system, because there's not really a lot of information here. It was Streets of Peril. It's a sword and sorcery game. It's set in the Renaissance period. So let me just, if you are going to pick this up, even though I got my PDF copy, please do consider using my affiliate link. Obviously, everyone that uses it, I'll then put the money back into the channel. But as we sort of look at the front cover here, this kind of, I think, may not necessarily put people off, but it looks a bit too clean and crisp, judging by the armour and stuff. But obviously, as you sort of go to the fringes and you see the ghouls and the ghosts and the skeletons coming in to attack, it actually is a lot darker than you think. This very much has that Solomon Kane, 15th, 16th to 18th century. Black powder is coming in. There's still magic in this world. There's still miracles. But I think it's just because the armour looks all clean and crisp. The world here is none of that. Okay, so I think this just makes sense to actually just get straight into the not charming covered book as it actually is. It's a bit too nice. But here we got the author, Kyle Griswold. Say layouts by him. Cover, Pavel. There's nothing wrong with the cover, by the way, Pavel. I think it's a beautiful cover, but maybe it's could have been a little bit darker, because as we get into this world, it's very sort of grim dark. So we're going to get into the contents page. So it's going to take you through the introduction. So just little bits of information about role playing, dice pool settings in here. We're going to jump straight into character creation, which is about 29 pages. Then we're going to get into the rules. Exploding dice is the first part of the rules. I love pool systems, exploding dice, which is what made me fall in love with Oathhammer. Am I going to have the same feelings about this? Cameras on, there's a chance that it's going to be sort of in the same vein. Once we then get through all the rules, we're then going to get into equipment. The equipment is really interesting, actually, because what Kyle does is he gives really good use of keywords to make similar weapons really interesting. So it's things like, you can tell the sort of era we're in when there's a main gauche in here. So, you've got that sort of full-on jousting to death, maybe. But you can still use your little parrying sword. Has got magic. Say we've got 20 pages of magic. We've then got campaign and world building, and it's and then we'll get into the Cimbrian, I think, Empire, which is how it's pronounced. That's how it's going to be pronounced for the rest of this video, which is about 15 pages. Said I would have liked a little bit more in there when we get into that, and then the bestiary is broken down to beasts, demons, drowners, elves, Fomorians, giants, etc. And then we got this really, really cool adventure at the end. It's only 5 pages, but it really does set the scene for the world. So the introduction is going to talk about the tone of the world, which I think I could pretty much summarize this is, I'm going to go with Warhammer Fantasy setting, but it's also got that city-state element, which I'd say Warhammer does have that, the rivalries between the different cities. So it does feel that. But because the cities have got different cultures and sort of beliefs, it does really sort of roll into one of my favourite games, other than the second edition. There's a third edition come. It kind of feels like 7th Sea in that kind of setting where you've got the city-states and all the cities are completely sort of independent but working alongside each other, but they've got all the rivalries, different nobility and things like that. So you could also even class it sort of down the ancient Greek sort of way. Streets of Peril uses a dice pool mechanic. It's a d6 mechanic. You're going to take your attribute plus a skill and add those numbers together, roll a number of d6, and you're looking normally to get a 4 or more, which is a success. Simple as that. Each one counts as a success. If you roll a 6, you get to re-roll it because it explodes. And then if that's another 4 or more, you get an additional success in here. But yeah, the world itself is going to take you through geography. It's an ancient world, so it's existed from a sort of barbarian state originally. Hence the reason it's got that sort of Greek sort of feel to it. 400 years ago, they were invaded by another empire. Before that, they were re-invaded. So they're kind of in that rebuilding stage with the sort of lack of trust and, the attack's going to come back. So, there's lots of dark cults in here. There's wild men in here. There's fae folk and giants. And there's even sort of all the way up to sort of worm dragon type entities in this sort of fantasy setting. But each of the cities and towns, they're going to have it's full of sort of guilds and cults. There are variety of, it talks about the nobility as we get into the families. And my favourite thing is the Witchfinders, which is they're basically like paladin sort of zealots. I kind of associate with the sort of Knights Templar type people, but they are really designed to go and sort of hunt down the Zajic invasion, which was the people that sort of invaded sort of 400 years ago, that actually helped unite the whole of the area, sort of. Okay, so that's kind of your world. But so we're going to get into chapter 1, which is your character building. So first of all, you're going to decide your dice pool for your attributes. We have 6 attributes. We've got might, which is your strength and brawn, toughness, constitution. Your agility, basically it's dexterity. Willpower, should be familiar, your sort of mental strength. Intelligence, quite obvious what that is. Then finally we've got fate, which is represent your luck. And what you're going to do is each one of those you're going to assign a dice pool. So one of them is going to get a 4 in it, 2 of them are going to get 2, 2 of them are going to get 3, and then one of them is going to get 1. Okay, and that basically represents the dice pool you get. We're then going to look at your lineage, which is ancestry or race. Because this is a human-centric world, apart from the Fae, which you can play, each of the lineages are going to talk about. So if we look at the Bryathon, I think that's pronounced, they're very much this is what I say about this, the 7th Sea. They kind of feel like the Avalon type race, which technically is an adjacent for Britain. But each of the lineages are going to get 2 special abilities. It's going to be a constant power. So, for example, they're going to get Mystic Tattoos. Enemy combatants targeting you with hostile magic incur a -1 penalty to magic. -1 penalty or +1 penalty always means add 1 to the die pool, remove 1 for the die pool, okay? And the Seafarer, you gain +1 orientation, row, sail, and survive. Hence the reason, because they're on, on this sort of island state. And then we've got like the burgers, the changeling, which I say, so we have got this sort of fae people here that are very good at diplomacy, and they get some initial magic to start with. But it's not necessarily always city-states, because we've got commoners here as well as highborn, where then we've got a couple of other sort of city-states as well as the Zajic, which are they're the people that invaded 400 years ago. So if you are going to play them, I think you're going to have a huge element of sort of distrust, but they're quite good at stealth, and they're going to roll a red dice for stealth checks, which I'll explain the dice once we actually get into the game mechanic. Got a table here for random names for the 5 different areas, and then we're going to get ambitions. Ambitions are ongoing goals that your players are trying to achieve, and what it does is it keeps the characters grounded and defined. It feels very heroic in aspect, because what you're going to need to do is pick one of, not up to, but you're going to pick 3 different ambitions. And they make things like recover a lost family heirloom, humiliate a bitter enemy, locate an elven ruin, something along those lines that's going to take 2 to 4 or 5 game sessions to fulfill. Once you achieve it, you're going to get some experience. Once you're staying on path, you're also going to get additional experience each session. Okay. Once you sort of deviate from it, that's where it's you're not going to get the experience that all the other players in the party are going to be getting. So think about your ambitions, play your character to your ambitions. There's a little bit more of a section that's going to come up once we get into the campaign. Classes. So this is the role that your player is going to have in the party. And the classes are basically divided into the main class, and then we've got subclass. But so, for example, the brute here, these are the tough fighters. They're going to be things like they can subclass into berserkers, brawlers, folk hero, or a thug. But each class is going to get some trait special abilities. So this one is going to get crushing blow. Your melee attacks impose a -1 penalty to their armor rolls. You can ignore pain, which upon receiving damage, you may roll a number of black dice equal to your ranks in toughness. And mighty blows gave +1 bonus to damage while wielding melee weapons. You're going to get some additional skills. So, for example, +1 rank in athletics, 2 in fighting, 3 in grit, hit points, and +2 in intimidation. It's going to tell you what armor you can wear, what proficiencies, so light, medium, and heavy. They're going to get melee weapons, common and heavy, and then they're going to get throwing. Some additional starting equipment and some coins to go, and then you will pick a subclass from one of the 4. And once you've picked it, you stick with it. That is you stuck within that subclass. But each subclass will just give you an additional special trait. So, for example, the berserker is going to get rage, the brawler is going to get some lethal hands, the folk hero is going to get some inspiring presence, and then the thug will get rogue. Okay, so we've then got a cultist, which is, so this is what you think of sort of the religious Templar zealot type class. This is what I'm playing. If I'm ever going to get a chance to play this, I'm going Templar. So these are the sort of Templar knights that are out. Follow Wulfric. They're really, really cool. And actually, they're pretty much the saviors of the Empire when you read the history. So they're also going to get access to miracles, which are the, let's say, like from a cleric point of view, they're sort of divine type spells, okay? And we're going to get whether you're going to be a priest, a Templar, or a zealot. Then get the duelist, which is your fine sort of pointy fencing sort of charismatic character, and we've got 4 schools to pick from within here. Engineer. This is the one without any subclasses. So engineers they're quite powerful, because these are your smart people that if you think Warcraft, gnomes, you know how gnomes just made really cool, interesting things in Warcraft. This is, you don't have to be a gnome. Well, there's no gnomes in the world currently, but this is where you are, this is where you're going to, and you've got all these different special abilities here. And so let's just go with the clockwork time displacer. An auxiliary action, so you got a main action or auxiliary, which is like a half action or part action, quick action, whatever you might want to call it. You briefly suspend the flow of time around you. You may take a second action this turn. Okay, so that will just allow you to do a second action. And then you recharge on the DV7. So they've all got, most of them have got a DV4. Most of them have got a difficulty value, and to reuse it, you will then make your engineering check to then beat that score. And if you don't, the next round that you try to attempt it, that reduces by 1. Okay, so some of these, like grappling gun, is a DV1, so that should be quite easy to reset. Some of them don't have anything, but some of these, there aren't a huge amount of them, but they are pretty powerful. And so it just makes up for the fact that you're not going to get your subclass. So we've got the Magister, which is your magic user in here, and the subclass is here, Alchemist. You can make potions and things like that. Necromancer. I do love a Necromancer, a Seer, and a Wizard. We've then got the Man-at-Arms. These are your sort of, not your typical soldiers, because these are more about boosting other players and helping alongside combat and things like that. The scoundrel, your Han Solo, your rogue type character, you know, burglar, highwayman, assassin, and rake. And then finally, you got your wayfarer, which is your ranger, so your scout, your shadow stalker, your trophy hunter, and your explorer. So from there, you will basically get your starting abilities, starting traits, okay? We then have a load of special traits that any player can buy at any time with experience. You don't get access to any of these at the start, but it's going to give you things. These are, say, like feats, features, something along those lines. So some of them will have a prerequisite. So, for example, fencing master here, duelist. But these are things that are going to break the game. They're going to change the game rules and make your character a lot more unique. Let's then just pick on sharpshooter here. Few marksmen can match your skill with ranged weapons. Concealment, cover, and long range no longer impose penalties to your range attacks. That is nutsly powerful if you're going to go down the sort of archery route. Character experience, so you are going to advance by, so there's no levels to this game, you're just basically going to get some experience, and when you gain the experience you then can spend it to increase your skill ranks, get new spells or miracles, which we'll cover in a second, new traits, which we've just looked at, or a new invention. So if you want to, as you can see, the inventions cost a lot of money. They are twice as much as the spells, because they are pretty strong, okay? But you're going to get 50 experience at the end of the game session if you're working towards your ambition. During the normal game session, you should get 25 to 100, and then you can just expend experience here, you know, as and when that you incur it. So pretty much at the end of the game sessions. So character sheet is broken down. I do like it when they cover just a character sheet here and just sort of break down sort of where your attributes are, your grit and your luck points, initiative and armor, skills, traits, magic, and equipment in here. So chapter 2 is the rules, and it starts front and center with the coolest mechanic in the game, and that is exploding dice, which I've already covered. So you roll a 6 on any dice roll, you get to roll it again, you roll another 4 or more, that's another one. And it doesn't end. If you keep rolling 6s, you can just keep going and having more and more successes. Talked about how to build a dice pool, standard tests. Most tests will have a DV of 1 if it's a routine, so that's the number of successes you need. Opposed rolls, if you are, you know, say stealth against observation, something like that, you will do an opposed test. So if the opposed test is equal, you will then go into the opposed extended test, and you would just keep going until there is an absolute winner. So nothing actually happens on the rounds, and neither of them actually advance. It's kind of like a mutual meeting point. Dice color. Okay, so the standard dice color that you're going to roll is white. That means if you ever roll a white die, 4 or more is success. As I talked about the stealth for the Zadrak culture, Ancestry I think it was called, then they get to roll a red dice on stealth checks. That means you roll the same dice pool, but you rolled red dice. 3s or more are a success. So you're looking at, it's going to become a little easier. If you ever get to do a black die, 2 or more. So you're only failing on 1s. Again, 6 still explode. It then gives you some examples for some attribute checks in here. So how you'd use a might check, toughness check, willpower, intelligence. The difficulty here, value for skill checks. So we've got routine is 1, you're going to need 1 success, and moderate 2, challenging 3, impossible, you're going to need 4. And then it's just going to list down all the skills in here. Some of the skills are advanced. So for example, heal here. So the attribute you're going to need is intelligence, but it says advanced. That means if you try to do a heal check on someone and you don't have the heal skill, because things like perception you can do just based off willpower, you're going to take -2 off your dice pool before you roll it. So it's not saying you can't do it, but if you're not trained or skilled in it, you can't. You can't. You know, you're not going to succeed as easy because you're going to lose 2 dice pool. Luck points. So you're going to get a number of luck points equal to your fate, okay? And how you're going to use luck points is in the best way that you can lose luck points, which I love what Carl's done here. Once you fail a roll, you can then spend a luck point to gain +2 to the roll. So you can roll 2 more dice. And you can spend as many luck points as you've got. And once your luck points are out, you don't get them back to the next session. I love the fact you can just use your luck point once you've failed. I hate games that go, you know, use your luck point before you roll. What's the point? You don't know whether you're going to be lucky or not. I just don't like it. Eventually, you're going to get into combat encounters, and you're going to start off with initiative, which you're going to make an agility roll. And whoever gets the most is going to succeed. If you've surprised someone, they're going to miss out that whole turn. This game is going to get attack and defense rolls. I know some people find that slows things down. I've been playing Warhammer Fantasy Role-Playing. I've been playing Werewolf and Vampires for many years, so I don't mind that opposed roll. So again, if you're shooting someone, you must equal or beat the number of successes they're going to roll with their defense dice. If you do damage, this becomes a DD, which is a damage roll. So each individual die that you do that gets to the 4 or more that gets through is going to be considered one. It's going to take 1 grit off their health. However, they are going to have some armor rolls, so they can actually roll to protect themselves against that. So what can you do on a combat action? So you're going to have an action and an auxiliary action. So your action is your full action. Your auxiliary action is like a part action. So your full action is going to be things like attack, cast a spell, draw a weapon, dual wield, grapple, hold your action. I always like it with, you've got that option to hold and go later. You can support someone to give them an additional dice, do an armed attack, use items, things like that. We have attack modifiers here with some circumstance bonus is in as well. And then it'll take you through what the auxiliary moves are and also some additional things like movement in combat. So falling, flying, swimming, prone, how that all works, shooting into melee. So this has got all of your sort of combat rules. And if you're going to charge, you're going to do an additional 10-foot run. You can get a +1 to your attack rolls. The area effects, so if you're going to use grids, it just shows you how large. AoE, small AoEs, it's area effects, sorry. I just say AoE up here. The area effects, so it's just going to help you out. Characters are going to have a number of grit points, which doesn't really increase much as you go over, unless you're going to get some special talent to do that. And as you then go down to 0 GP, grit points, you're basically going to be critically injured. You need to make a toughness check, and if you fail that toughness check, you're going to be rolling on this injury chart here for something that may have a more permanent effect. Got all the rules here for healing as well. So there are some magical healing, but healing in general takes about 8 hours of rest to get 1 GP point. Some spells, weapons, and conditions are all listed here. So if you're ignited, it just tells you here what's going to happen each round and how you end it. Things like poison, restrain, sicken. This should be very familiar to anyone that's actually played a role-playing game before. Say random injury tables, crit tables technically, which is good. So as we get into the equipment, love the keywords and traits that Kyle throws into this. I say throws in a really loving way, if that makes sense. So we're going to talk about availability. So if you're in a hamlet, village, small city, or state, it's going to be harder to find the item. You can commission items to be made. Money actually runs properly in this, so we don't get that abstract money thing that I don't really like. But money's going to go from gold coins to silver coins to copper coins. And then we've got some incomes depending on what you do. You're going to earn some money. You can evaluate, you can haggle in here, then trade. And encumbrance is dealt with, is basically you're going to get your might skill by multiply it by 4, which will just determine how much you can carry. But each of the weapons are going to have a cost, damage, encumbrance, range, and then trait. And these traits are really cool. So for example, the main Gorge is going to have the parry trait here. So you can roll the red dice to attack, to parry against a melee attack. So if they are on black, you're on red, you've got more chance to parry. It also comes with the nimble trait, so you can use your agility instead of your might for using it in your offhand. There's things like smoke and stunning, but we've got firearms, misfires as well. So if you're going to fire black powder weapons, there's a chance that the weapons are going to misfire in here. And it's got things, blunderburst, bow, hand axe. So it basically, I like the fact there's some art in here, and the fact it does sort of list them. And then we've got these, the multicolored tables. I don't know what this background thing is called here, but it's nice and easy and clear. And it's separated out by common, fencing, heavy, because depending on what proficiency the players have got will determine which sort of melee range weapons that they can actually pull from. Different types of ammunition in here as well for all the range weapons. Armor works in a very similar way. That's going to come with different traits as well. And it's going to tell you which dice you get it to roll. You're also going to have an amount of additional encumbrance for, wearing heavy armor. Got some rules here for mounts and work animals as well. So things like if you want a cat or a hunting dog or a monkey, you can have one. Healing supplies is in here. Food and drink, light sources is all included. And then just a load of miscellaneous things like dice, playing cards, a purse, rope. If you want to build traps, all the traps are in here that you've got. Black market, Highlands, if you need to get things like a attendant, a black knight to come around and help with you. They've got different rarities, so some of them are easier or harder to find. The price for lodgings, vehicles, transportation, and that's going to be the end of the equipment. And then we're going to get into magic. So magic, there's 2 types of magic ish. Well, we've got spells, miracles, but we've also got black and white magic. So the white magic is like the good magic that most of the players are going to cast, but there are some options for the sort of black magic which is classed as a spellcraft in this, okay? So, but obviously it just gives player options depending on what you want to do. But each of the spells is going to have a magical trait, the difficulty value, this is the DV, so that's how many successes you need to cast the spell, the components you're going to need, the duration, the range, and how many people you target, or whether it's an area effect. Some will also need a magic circle, where you're going to need to spend 10 minutes to set it up. Others are rituals, which you're going to need an hour. Now, when you're casting a spell, you'll make a magic roll, and you're going to look for a number of successes to cast that spell. If you roll any ones on that, you're going to get an arcane backlash. And as that arcane backlash fills, you then may roll on the manifestation table. Also, it might stop your ability to be able to cast spells until you take a rest. Miracles work slightly different. There is no difficulty value per miracle, but what you get is the first miracle you cast per day is a DV of 1, second one 2, third one 3, fourth one 4. I could carry on going, okay? And then once you start failing, that's going to sort of, stop your ability to cast miracles on that day. So as you can see, let's just pick a miracle. Cure illness we'll go with. So it's instantaneous, so it's going to happen instantly. You're going to need to touch them. One target. The target of the miracle is no longer blinded, deafened, diseased, poisoned, or sickened. So hence going back to those conditions, that will all explain that. So that's how you're going to remove it, because the miracles are very sort of divine, sort of lay on hand, the ability to heal, righteous armor, things like that. So from the spells, let's go on Barricade here. So it's difficulty 4. Trust me to pick something that's difficult. You're going to need a lock. The duration is going to last a day. It's going to be touch, okay? And target 1. You magically lock a door, gate, preventing it from being opened with a key or lockpick. The target of this spell can still be destroyed, forcefully opened, or breached with the open spell. So let's go and have a look at the open spell. That makes sense, doesn't it? If I could do alphabetical, open spell, difficulty 4, so that's quite cool. It keeps them on the same level. You are going to need a lock pick for this. Instantaneous, touch. You open one lock or latch door. The spell can be used to breach the barricade spell, obviously. Let's look at magic flame over here. Difficulty value 1. Nice and easy to pull off. Opponent, you're going to need a match. Duration, a minute. Self, produce a small flame in your open palm. Ooh. This fire may assume an unnatural colour and will burn for the spell's duration or until you close your hand. The flame is incapable of harming creatures. Boo. Though it can be used to ignite flammable objects and produce the same light as a candle. So that's quite cool. Doesn't do a lot of damage, but doesn't do any damage. Ooh, life leech. Difficulty 5. You're going to need a leech. Target this spell feels their body twist and contort in agony while the caster invigorates with enhanced vitality. The living creature within range suffers 4 DD damage, which ignores armor. So that's just going to be 4 dice ignoring their armor. Every grit point your target loses, you gain 1. You'd say above. Obviously, you can't go above your maximum allowance, although extra grit points gained in this manner are lost. That's quite cool. So, yeah. Oh, extra planar travel, difficulty 7. Good luck pulling that off for a while. There is extra planar stuff that we're going to talk about. Unholy audience. Oh, that's quite cool. So that's getting into the miracles. Wall of fire. Okay, so alchemy. If you do go down the alchemy routes, we've got the components that you're going to use. Some drugs here. So there's 4 examples of 4 different drugs. Different potions and poisons. Witchfinder trap-ins. So if you are going to become a witchfinder, become a witchfinder. Witchfinders are cool. Then you've got some as you might guess, they may be a little bit Templar, Witcher aspect too. We're then going to look at some magic items. So we've got some arcane, divine magic items, and we've got lesser, greater, and legendary items. I don't really think I need to explain to you what a magic item is, but obviously they do get more interesting and more powerful as you head towards the sort of legendary items, all of which I'm not going to spoil. Chapter 5 gets into the campaign. So this is your Games Master section, which assumes that I think that you have an element of experience in gameplay, which is, I have no issues with this, but it does give you some really good guides in here about world building, how role-playing works, dice rolling, difficulty values. Be fair as Games Master, be consistent and impartial. You're not trying to beat the player, but you do get the final say. And if you do do something that the players don't think is fair, then maybe retcon it at the end of the start of the next session, or something along those lines. When we're looking at party creation, you've got several options. The type of party that you want the players to create. Are they house retainers? Do they all work on a ship's crew? Were they once in the stocks or in prison? Are they in military service? What sort of theme for the game? Do you want a horror theme? Do you want a political, mystery, sort of trade, criminal, religious theme? If you want to design your own city, we've got a few ideas here for like locations, industry, cultures, and politics. And it then talks about like the sort of sorcery world. It's it's a world that is gritty with an underlying sort of aspect of realism. Fame and fortune. The players are going to become very powerful, heroic characters because they have got their sort of the deeds that they want to keep to. Combat, deadly. Okay, be wary. Very few grit points. They don't increase as time goes on. If you're looking for some help or some guides just to get going, we've got some random encounter tables here. So for in the alleys, in the sewers, and the wilderness. As we get into ambitions, we've got examples of 8 different ambitions that the players can have. And it sort of talks about the prerequisites, so the things the players need to do. Remember, this is what keeps them grounded, and also is going to help provide them with additional experience as they go through. So it's things like, a legendary deed. Have they got vengeance? You've been wronged by another and seek retribution through violence. It's okay if it's for vengeance. We then get the chapter 6 is the world building. So this is going to take you through the history of the world. So the Alvan threat, the Zajic invasion, and then we're going to take you through the geography of the world. We've got a little map here. There are other lands as well that it's going to cover. So it's like the Gilded League, Mycena, and Trebos. Probably butchering all these pronunciations at all. It's going to take you through the law and order, the city council, city officials, trials, duels. Informal duels to the death are technically illegal, though rarely punished. And then we've got a load of guilds here, so the thief guilds. All the common laws. So, what's the impact of murder? There's a bit on carrying arms. So if you're not a citizen, it talks about how you become a citizen, how you can't openly wield weapons, so it's a reason to become a citizen in there. But then I'm going to talk about the culture and the fashion, how hard they work, how, men and women are treated. Violence. Sobruns are quick to anger and slow to forgive. They very much have that dwarven aspect. We then get a whole page of different guilds, so like the crafting guilds, all the way through fencing, peace guilds. So if the peace guild's quite funny because they don't trust the local law enforcement, so they've got their own guilds for themselves. Then different mercenaries that you can hire. The knightly orders, Templars, Sigardian Templars. From the religious point of view, we've got 5 main religions. Sigard, might sound familiar if you're a Warhammer fan, as well as Wulfric, which is... But then, Sarah, Hertha, as well as Leshik, which is the horned one. So, yes, some of that should sound, I think, relatively familiar. We've all then got some variety of lesser deities in here, some demon princes, and some dark cults, including the elf and the fae and the lich cults, which of the necromancers may be a cult I quite like throwing in. Finally, before we get into the adventure, we've got the city-states. So we've got a in-depth look at 4 of the city-states, well, the 4 city-states. So we've got Drakenheim, which is, it's then going to break it down to the city governance, the industries, life, influential factors in here, intrigue. We've got Grisendorf, I think the city, again, all way broken down with all their sort of flags. Oberhofen, which was, I think that was the first city, if I remember, to actually fall during the Zafric War. And then finally, we've got Sternberg, which is where the adventure is set, which I have got the adventure as well. As we get into chapter 7, which is the Bestiary, this is broken down by monster types. So, for example, beast, things like that. So, but all the monsters in here, there's some, not all of them, but some of them feel very sort of mythic and interesting. So, like, look at this Bogdopus, which is quite horrific. But some of them are unique monsters, but they will have potential to cast spells. And if they do, they still need to make their casting check. But others will have special traits, which may be penalties or advantages they're going to get to some of their abilities and stats. But all the monsters will have a stat block here. So we've got GP, which is grit points, AV armor points, D defense, FD fighting dice. This is melee dice that they roll. SD is shooting dice, so range. MD is magic dice. Then we've got their might, toughness, agility, willpower, intelligence, and fate. Then any sort of weapons that they kind of got. So we'll just look here. There's Bogdopus here. which is 16 grit. That's a lot of grit. Obviously, it can't cast any spells or range, so it's 8 FD. But it's then going to talk about it's amphibious, so it can breathe in water and you do not incur movement penalties. Remember, they're always on a black die unless it's said. So here we go. We've got savage here. So they roll red dice for damage. So that it's black dice to hit, but once they do their damage, which is 6 DD, this is going to be off red die, okay? Which is 6 DD. That is going to be off red dice, so that's going to be 3 or more to do damage. And we've got things like a donkey, griffin, mustang, not the car, sword mantis here, warhound, werewolf, always like a werewolf, and then the worm. And we're against all these sort of demons, abyssal knights, infernal horrors. We've got a couple of elves in here as well. Then we've got the fae, including the bloodcaps and the banshee. Then we've got some Fomorians, which are quite freaky looking. Some giants and ogres and trolls. Some goblins, golems. Some henchmen and hireling for the players, because that obviously back in the equipment section. Then we then got the mutants and then these wild men that tend to hang around a lot of the forests, and then the undead, so revenants in here, poltergeist, ghouls, and wight and wraith. And then finally we've got the adventure that I'm just going to sort of ping through to get to the back. Index in here, which is always really helpful. List of all the weapons, injury chart, misfire tables, the miscast spells for the spells, and a little bit of the designer notes in here, talking about Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, and the novels of Robert E. Howard. Character sheet always at the back, which is really, really handy. So that's it. I say that's it. That's I do love a good Warhammer dice pool equivalent game. I utterly fell in love, and Ewan and I we fell in love with the D6 dice pool. It's such a nice, cool, and easy mechanic. All you're doing is you're rolling a bunch of dice, looking to get 4 or more. If you got red dice, the good thing is you don't actually need red dice, you don't need black dice, you don't need white dice, because your dice pool is always just your die pool. Yeah, so if you are needing red dice, you could just use the same dice that you used before. Just remember that 3 or more. If you go into a black, just remember it's 2 or more. That's easy. I think from a games master point of view, if you're doing open rolls, I would very much be going, here you go, here's red dice, here's the black dice, so they're fully aware of the type of damage that you do, because then the players can actually physically see it out in front of them. But I don't really think it matters. You could use multicolored dice. But from a dyslexia point of view, this has been an absolute blast to read. It's, again, just like Oathhammer, it's so easily laid out. The content is nice and clear. You just know from outset a little bit about the rules as you're going into it. You then get straight into the character creation. Character creation's easy. You're then going to flow straight into rules, exploding dice, how fighting works, your skills, equipment. Load the character up, add all your magic in there. A little bit about campaigns. To say that the one thing that I would have liked to have seen more on is fleshing out the world. That there isn't a lot of world fleshing, if that makes sense, especially for a book that's been out now for 5 years. There is another, obviously the adventure that I've got as well, so I will be looking at that at some stage. But there's snippets of the world, and I could quite easily just take Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, put it into this world. Zweihander is exactly the same. It's that. I'm tired of those systems now, that D100 roll under post rolls. Because say Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, it's such a good game, but I'm constantly needing to play on a VTT. Playing a D6 dice pool system and hearing that clatter of dice is really, really exciting. The world, I want more of the world. I'm really looking forward to where Kyle takes this. I hope he does more Oathhammer, but I hope he also comes back and wraps in this. Because I didn't see an open gaming license in here, so I don't know if I assume people can't write for it if they wanted to, because I'd quite happily write a few things for this and Oathhammer. But Oathhammer feels like you shouldn't touch that, because that's his little baby. But this is nice and vague for good reasons, if that makes sense. As an experienced games master, you're going to be able to come into this and hit this world and stuff. I think you're going to need more tables of random tables to flesh the world out, but there's no reason why you couldn't take a Warhammer source book or any of those sort of, even the Solomon Kane type books, and then convert that into this. So you've got the 4 city-states. There are hints and tips of adventure and adventure ideas, but I said that's the bit where this falls down for me. The world is really interesting, but I need more. I need more. Well, it's not that I need necessarily more. I think you need more tools to make this work, and I think that's where it kind of falls down. Other than that, I absolutely love it. I love the background, the culture, the brutality of the world. That it is, as everyone said on our Oathhammer review, it is Warhammer Fantasy Role Playing with the coolest dice mechanic that is out there. I absolutely love it, and I can't wait to see where Kyle goes from this. But there's a little bit. Can't get beyond the fact that I think inexperienced games master is going to struggle with this. So if you are going to struggle with this, go and get Oathhammer. I actually get both. I don't regret having either of these in my collection. But if you've enjoyed this video, please like, share, subscribe to the channel. Forgot to mention how wonderful the magic is and the miracles. It's a really clean system. And I'll see you on the next one. Thank you for watching.